A fiery debate has erupted on Twitter over the prices of Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta staples. So today's video, we're going to be going over a few cheaper options for obtaining these cards, as well as being able to maximize the value of the cards you already own. So let's get right into the video. Now, the first thing I would like everyone to do, and honestly, this is a pretty interesting one, but this is how we're going to be getting cards for extremely cheap, if not with no money at all. So, take any card you have. Honestly, it really doesn't matter, any card at all. Go ahead and be looking at the front of the card itself, all right? Now, in the bottom left of the card, there's actually a code for the card there. And that's actually a serial number for each card. And that number really doesn't matter, so go ahead and turn that card over, all right? Now, on the back of the card itself, under the Yu-Gi-Oh logo, what does that actually say? Trading card game. I know. Bad joke. But honestly, it's to point out the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh! At its core is supposed to be a trading card game. That was the way it was designed at the beginning, and that is the way it is supposed to be able to have budget players obtain their cards, is by trading the cards they already own for the stuff they need. And honestly, this was heavily ruined not only by COVID, but Master Duel. So during COVID, a lot of players, honestly, let's be honest, none of us really went to the OTSs, and we were definitely not going to be fidgeting around with everyone else's cards, going through hundreds, if not thousands, of everyone's stuff during the pandemic. No one was doing that. If anything, that's why the Lost Arts actually came out, was to promote people to even go to the OTSs and spend money there to keep them open and to begin with. So not only were we just kind of on TCG Player buying any of the cards we really wanted online, which right then and there we saw a huge increase in a lot of the prices of the cards themselves, even if they were not collectible, but we were also then introduced to games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, where we were able to obtain anything we really needed. We would just spend the money, we got everything we wanted, and then we actually were able to trade in the game with the dust we'd acquire for breaking down the access cards. So even though there's trading in the Master Duel, we as players really were kind of not involved in trading for years and years. And honestly, even a little bit before COVID, trading was starting to die down. But if you're an older player, you remember everyone at the tournaments, especially at regionals and higher, with their trade binders, maybe multiple binders. It was crazy. And if you needed a card, very rarely did you actually have to spend money to get it. Maybe for the hyper meta cards that maybe people weren't getting rid of. But even then, if you had enough value in the binder where they couldn't feel safe enough to be getting rid of it, or it would even go up in the future, they'd still trade you that meta staple. And then again, since you're not actually dealing with physical cash, a lot of players actually felt pretty confident in being able to trade a few dollars higher than the card's value, knowing that it would entice the other player to trade the card that they didn't want to get rid of. And again, some of these cards would go up in value, some of them would not, but it always felt good when you'd be able to trade for a meta card that you would need for a deck and not have to spend the money on it. And then I can actually personally say a large amount of my collection or cards I have nowadays are from trading, and I definitely would not have acquired them any other way. Now that brings me to the next point, and that is the actual prices of the cards themselves. And I don't want to debate whether, it's okay these prices are expensive or not, or this is a hobby, you shouldn't be better at spending your money. I don't want to get into any of that debate. Honestly, that's all opinionated stuff and attacking. I don't want to get into that. But what we know now, if a player is going to consistently buy a box that is $80 or higher, they're going to need to be able to be pulling some chase cards that they're either A, wanting to hold on to, or B, willing to get rid of. So when we were seeing actually earlier this year, when sets were actually failing just out of the gates, and even in the future, we actually saw stores stop purchasing the Yu-Gi-Oh product. And that is an outcome no player wants to see. So in a way, it is not actually such a bad thing that some of these cards are actually $120, $100 plus, especially when players are paying $80 just for the chance to pull them. But where the danger actually lies is how players are actually going about obtaining these cards. Since not a lot of players are trading or even willing to trade, the value of these cards of course are going to be higher, because the only way to obtain these cards is to purchase them. And then essentially for some of these meta staple cards, you have to in a way outbid other people by buying them for higher prices. If you're sitting there with a trade binder trying to trade someone, it just makes it a lot easier. And then again, even then, you could trade a little bit higher value. You can do some cash and some trade that might equal a little bit higher value than what they would sell it on TCG Player. So in the long term, they're netting some value and you're saving some money. But these are all things that we have to look at when we're talking about these cards being triple digits. Now, if players are literally unwilling to go out and trade at all, then we're going to see the prices of these cards maintain highs, and then we're also going to be seeing a lot of the unused cards still go down in price, and then the cards you own that aren't useful are going to be useless. But when you see some of these cards go from $18 to $43, it shouldn't be something as a gut punch to you. It should be a little bit more of a spur of inspiration, because if you are able to obtain these cards, especially as a budget player, it is even more meaningful for you in the long term to be able to trade up into higher forms of cards, so then even as a budget player, you can still compete in the games of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, a good example of this is Bellstar the Black Witch. As we know, all the decks have been playing her. She's actually been main decked for quite some time. But if we go down to November 15th, okay, is when she was at her lowest, we were seeing them sell at about $19.52. And I do remember at some point I did actually see them $18, $19. I believe they were still 18s to 19s when we went into the Black Friday TCG sale. So I know even with some kickbacks, they're actually closer to $16, $15 than that $20 mark, okay? So that was a perfect time to be picking up Bellstar the Black Witch. And again, even wanted at one point was about $50, $60. But if you are a budget player, those numbers are still a little unaffordable to some players. So this is why the trading mechanic of the game is so important, and why we're actually bringing up these prices. Because if you're a budget player, it is even more important to be keeping an eye on the markets so you know when to trade and pick up cards for the future. So we're talking about the Bellstar Black Witch. Let's go ahead and coincide that with the card we actually just featured on a Too Hot to Hold video for our market watch, and that is number 90 Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord. And in our video, we talked about how this is too hyped up of a card to be holding on to. Yes, it's good in horrors. Yes, it was hyped a couple months ago, but we see that it's going to be getting reprinted in the Battle Legends reprint set, but they're still sitting at about $62, $63 a piece. But if we go over to that November 15th timeline that we saw the Bellstar at the low at, we will see this card was actually sitting at about $74, $71. So essentially $75 for this card. So for one number 90 that a lot of players actually were able to pull from their Battle Legends sets, they would have been able to trade this for the value of more than 3 Bellstar the Black Witches. And again, even wanted Seeker of the Sinful Spoils at November 15th was $63. So you would have actually had more value in the number 90 than in the wanted. This is why it is extremely crucial for budget players to know when to get rid of their cards when they have hiked up in price, because even some players that are budget were able to at least obtain a couple copies of number 90, and it would have been very useful for them not to just sell it for a little bit of cash. Definitely don't sell it for a 50% cut to a storefront, okay? But instead, wait to be able to trade them for optimal value. What would have been better, honestly? Selling the card for $65, $75 a piece, or trading them for 3 Bellstars and maybe even getting something tossed in on the side because your card was actually worth more? Well, fast forward to now, we know which one was an actually better option. And this is exactly how you're able to utilize the cards that are already in your collection, maybe even in a deck you have, that could actually be used in a trade to fund you long-term into the game. Because that one trade right there I just mentioned is a trade that's possible, especially since number 90 was so hyped going into the Horus format that a bunch of budget players definitely missed an opportunity to be able to obtain some of these meta cards going into the future. Because again, if you would have traded for that place of Bellstars, they're comfortably sitting at about $40 a piece right now. So that is double the value of the number 90. But again, this is just one example of ways that you can trade cards that are a little bit easier for the budget players to be able to obtain for long-term value in the meta game. And this is definitely useful information, not only to be able to gain value in cards, but for budget players that want to play in a meta game. This can propel you into that meta game, actually give you a fighting chance at your locals, be able to top, go to higher events, all because you were able to obtain more expensive cards by trading for them at good values with the cards you already own. So again, this is just why I try to harp over and over again that we get back to the trading card game scene of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now guys, I know this isn't actually a cheat code for free cards. I really wish it was. It's a little bit of research and a lot of footwork, but I do express I wouldn't even own a fraction of the cards or collections I personally have if I wouldn't have traded for literally like 80% of them. Okay, that's an honest truth. All right, I've traded for almost everything I've owned. And if you got anything from the video, do hit the subscribe button so you do not miss out on any content such as the too hot to hold videos where we talk about cards to be getting rid of that are just too expensive to be holding on to, or the market watches where we talk about cards before they go up in price. Your average market watch will actually tell you about cards after they spiked, so there's no way you're actually obtaining them now. But the market watches we talk about here will actually cover cards months before they spike. So again, guys, thank you for watching the video. We're gonna have more content flash up above, but as always, guys, stay safe, have a good night, and suck it, nerds.